The shadow within. Why do we sometimes feel a flicker of pleasure when someone else falters? A rival stumbles at work, a peer fails to achieve what we could not, or the person who dismissed us finds themselves facing humiliation. That moment, a whisper of satisfaction, can feel both exhilarating and guilty. It is a sensation as old as humanity itself, a shadow in the human psyche that we rarely admit exists. Yet, it is here, in these quiet recesses of our minds, that the story begins. From the blood-soaked arenas of ancient Rome to the polished halls of medieval courts, the delight in another's misfortune has always been part of human experience. Roman citizens, cheering as gladiators fought and fell, were not merely seeking entertainment, they were witnessing a ritualized form of social hierarchy, a reflection of power and vulnerability. Medieval nobles observing rivals humiliated or disgraced felt a similar surge, the thrill of dominance, the validation of their own status. These are not isolated acts of cruelty. They are the echoes of instincts encoded deep within us, shaped by millennia of survival, competition, and social stratification. Modern life has not erased this impulse. In fact, it amplifies it. Social media, office politics, and public scandals have become the arenas of contemporary schadenfreude. We scroll through feeds, pausing at every stumble, every misstep, every rejection, feeling a subtle satisfaction that can be as fleeting as it is profound. And yet, for all its prevalence, it is rarely acknowledged. We are taught to see envy, rivalry, and pleasure at another's failure as morally wrong, even shameful. But the instinct remains, quiet, persistent, unavoidable. Psychologists suggest that this reaction is tied to our understanding of self and others. When someone else falters, it affirms our relative position in the world. It reassures us that failure is universal, that we are not alone in our struggles, and sometimes that we are, in some small way, justified in our ambitions or grievances. It is a paradox, a moral discomfort paired with an instinctive reward, a secret thrill that conflicts with the principles we consciously uphold. And it is this tension, the collision of instinct and conscience, that defines the shadow within. It is uncomfortable, unsettling, and profoundly human. We are drawn to it, repelled by it, and yet incapable of fully ignoring it. As we begin this exploration, we must ask ourselves, how often do we find ourselves quietly wishing for the downfall of those who stand above us, who oppose us, or who have denied us? And what does this reveal about the human mind, about society, and about the hidden desires that shape our world? In understanding this shadow, we do not judge it. We observe, we question, and we confront it. For it is only by acknowledging the darkness within that we can begin to unravel the complex web of envy, rivalry, and the secret thrill of another's misfortune, a web that stretches from the arenas of antiquity to the digital stages of the present day, from envy to vindication, historical perspectives. To understand the shadows within us, we must turn back the clock, far beyond the polished veneer of modern society, to a time when envy and rivalry were not merely personal feelings, but instruments of survival, status, and power. Across history, humans have measured themselves against others, and the consequences of falling short have often been public, ritualized, and spectacular. In ancient Rome, the arena was more than a place of entertainment. It was a mirror reflecting the hierarchy of society. Gladiators fought not just for survival, but for glory, honor, and the approval of the masses. Spectators did not watch merely to witness combat. They watched to see who would triumph and who would fail. And in those moments of failure, they experienced a complex blend of fear, relief, and satisfaction. The fall of a rival reinforced social order and validated the dominance of the powerful, while simultaneously feeding a collective appetite for spectacle. Envy and schadenfreude were not private emotions. They were woven into the fabric of the crowd, shared, celebrated, and normalized. Medieval Europe presents a different, yet equally revealing perspective. Courts and castles were arenas of intrigue where personal rejection and rivalry could have deadly consequences. Nobles maneuvered for influence and favor, often at the expense of their peers. When a rival was disgraced, stripped of titles, or publicly humiliated, it was more than personal triumph. It was a social affirmation, a public statement of superiority. Chroniclers of the time often documented these events with meticulous detail, revealing the psychological significance of witnessing another's fall. Social status was fragile, and the pleasure derived from another's misfortune was a survival tool, a way to navigate the treacherous waters of hierarchy and ambition. Yet this is not merely a tale of elites and courts. Across cultures and eras, ordinary people have engaged in similar dynamics. Villagers observed and whispered about those who failed to uphold community norms. Traders noted competitors' failures, using them as leverage. Even religious or philosophical teachings acknowledge the allure of watching others stumble, warning that the mind is naturally drawn to comparisons, to judgment, to the subtle thrill of being spared from misfortune while others falter. Philosophy has long wrestled with this human tendency. Nietzsche, writing of the will to power, suggested that envy and rivalry are fundamental drivers of human behavior, forces that propel ambition but can also corrode morality. Machiavelli observed that rulers and states thrive not only through virtue, but through cunning, manipulation, and, at times, orchestrating the downfall of rivals. Hobbes, in his reflections on human nature, argued that comparison and competition are unavoidable. They shape our interactions, our societies, and our very sense of self. These thinkers remind us that the desire to witness another's failure is not a flaw limited to the weak. It is a structural part of human consciousness, a reflection of the tension between self-interest and moral awareness. History shows that this impulse is neither modern nor extraordinary. It is timeless, inevitable, and profoundly human. From the Roman Colosseums to medieval courts, from whispered gossip in villages to the grand machinations of empires, the pleasure we take in others' misfortune has been a constant companion. And yet, it is not merely about cruelty. It is about validation, self-assurance, and the human need to locate oneself within a social hierarchy. It is about understanding our own place in the world by observing the triumphs and failures of others. By tracing these patterns through time, we begin to see that the shadows within us are not accidental. They are inherited. They are the residue of survival strategies, social structures, and cognitive tendencies that have guided humanity for millennia. To witness another's downfall is to confront a mirror of our own desires, fears, and vulnerabilities. And as history reveals, this mirror is often more than reflective. It is instructive, cautioning us about the power of envy, the seduction of vindication, and the moral ambiguity that has accompanied human ambition for as long as civilization has existed. It is within this historical context that our understanding of envy and schadenfreude deepens. We begin to recognize that the pleasure of witnessing a rival's failure is not a quirk of the modern age, but an enduring feature of human nature, a thread woven through the tapestry of our collective past, carrying forward into the arenas of today. The psychology of schadenfreude and resentment. If history teaches us where envy and vindication have thrived, psychology explains why. Beneath the surface of civility, beneath the polite smiles and measured gestures, there is a mechanism quietly at work in our minds, a system that rewards us for witnessing the misfortune of others. This is Schadenfreude, a German word that captures the subtle, sometimes uncomfortable pleasure we derive from someone else's stumble. It is not merely a passing thought, it is a profound reflection of the human psyche, revealing our vulnerabilities, desires, and contradictions. Schadenfreude is not a moral failing, it is an evolutionary artifact. Psychologists argue that in our ancestral environments, comparing ourselves to peers and rivals was crucial for survival. If another hunter failed to catch food, or if a competitor fell in status, it had tangible consequences. Feeling relief, or even satisfaction, was adaptive. It reinforced our relative security, bolstered our self-esteem, and provided insight into potential threats. Today, the arenas are different, but the circuitry remains the same. We experience a rush when a rival fails at work, when a colleague is publicly embarrassed, or when the person who rejected us faces consequences. Our brains, unconsciously, are still calibrating status, measuring threats, and seeking reassurance. Social comparison theory deepens this understanding. Humans are inherently relational. We define ourselves not only by our abilities and achievements, but by how we measure against others. When someone surpasses us, it can evoke envy, a desire to reclaim status or recognition. When they falter, relief and satisfaction emerge, a psychological counterbalance. It is a dance between longing and reassurance, between ego threat and ego restoration. This tension explains why the fall of others can provoke such powerful emotional responses, blending pleasure, relief, and moral discomfort in equal measure. Resentment, on the other hand, often stems from perceived injustice. When someone who was rejected, overlooked, or underestimated achieves success, or when a rival thrives while we struggle, our minds perceive an imbalance. This feeling is both deeply personal and socially conditioned. It is intensified by the narratives we tell ourselves. They don't deserve this. I worked harder. If only they would fail, I would feel validated. Such thoughts are neither rare nor shameful. They are part of a shared human experience. Yet, unlike Schadenfreude, resentment carries the seed of escalation, of potential action, sometimes passive, sometimes overt, sometimes morally ambiguous. The psychology of these impulses is further complicated by the ego's fragile architecture. Freudian theory and later psychoanalysis suggest that we possess layers of selfhood: conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. The conscious mind may recoil from the idea of taking pleasure in another's misfortune, labeling it as immoral or unacceptable. Yet the unconscious celebrates in silence, relishing confirmation of our relative security, our cleverness, or our superiority. Cognitive dissonance arises, the mind straining to reconcile conflicting signals. I should feel compassion, yet I feel joy. I should be fair, yet I rejoice in their failure. This inner conflict produces both fascination and discomfort, compelling us to examine ourselves more closely. Consider how these dynamics play out in everyday life. In workplaces, Schadenfreude may surface when a competitor misses a promotion. In schools, it emerges when a peer stumbles publicly. In personal relationships, it appears in the quiet satisfaction of witnessing an ex-partner's struggle. Even in politics and society, the masses experience collective Schadenfreude when a public figure is exposed or humiliated. Across these scenarios, the underlying mechanisms are the same: comparative evaluation, ego protection, and the human craving for narrative closure. Yet the psychology of envy and Schadenfreude is not purely destructive. It can serve as a mirror, revealing our own insecurities, aspirations, and ethical boundaries. By observing our reactions, We gain insight into what we value, what threatens us, and how we navigate moral choices. Awareness, in this sense, transforms instinct into reflection, turning a primitive urge into an opportunity for understanding. And it is here, in this delicate interplay of instinct and intellect, that we confront one of the most unsettling truths about ourselves. Our fascination with another's downfall is neither shameful nor trivial. It is an enduring, deeply human force, one that has shaped our interactions, our societies, and our inner lives for millennia. To deny it is to deny a part of our evolutionary and psychological heritage. To recognize it is to begin a journey towards self-awareness, moral reflection, and ultimately, a more profound understanding of what it means to be human. The shadows of envy and schadenfreude are within us all, waiting to be acknowledged. By examining them with honesty and courage, we can begin to navigate not only the psychology of resentment, but the ethics of desire, ambition, and human interaction. A journey that will take us from the personal mind to the public arenas of the modern world, social media, and the modern arena of rivalry. In ancient Rome, the arena was physical, visceral, and immediate. In medieval courts, rivalries were enacted through gossip, intrigue, and public spectacle. Today, the arena has shifted. The battlefields of human envy, resentment, and schadenfreude have moved into our pockets, onto screens, and into feeds that scroll endlessly. Social media is the modern Colosseum, an unrelenting stage where successes, failures, rejections, and triumphs are broadcast for all to witness. Every post, every image, every status update becomes a potential site of comparison. When a colleague announces a promotion, when a peer posts a carefully curated snapshot of their vacation, or when an ex-partner appears to thrive without us, the mind responds in patterns as old as humanity. The same mechanisms that once drove satisfaction at a gladiator's fall or a rival's disgrace now pulse quietly through the circuits of our digital lives. And yet, the scale is unprecedented. Whereas before, social comparison was limited by immediate social circles, digital platforms have exponentially expanded the field of rivals, competitors, and potential comparisons. Algorithms intensify this effect. They prioritize content that provokes emotion, that engages the user. A misstep, a humiliation, a public mistake. These are amplified, shared, and consumed at astonishing speed. Our brains, wired to respond to the subtle rewards of schadenfreude, are continually cued to notice the failures of others. The consequence is profound. The private satisfaction that once flickered quietly in the mind has become a public, collective experience. We do not merely observe another's fall, we participate in it, react to it, discuss it, and in some cases, magnify it. The psychology behind this is complex. Social media offers both intimacy and distance. We can witness failure without immediate consequence to ourselves, safely removed from the direct risks that might have existed in a real-world arena. This detachment allows the instinctive pleasure of witnessing misfortune to surface more freely. Simultaneously, the visibility of our reactions, likes, shares, comments, creates reinforcement loops, signaling approval from peers. Our impulses are validated, our pleasure amplified. In effect, social media transforms a subtle, private psychological reaction into a public performance of judgment and validation. Modern examples abound. Viral videos of public failures spark widespread commentary and engagement. Cancel culture thrives on collective scrutiny, where mistakes, real or perceived, become opportunities for societal schadenfreude. Workplace disputes leak online, turning colleagues into spectators of one another's downfalls. Even in personal relationships, feeds chronicle successes and failures alike, turning private emotions into public narratives. The mechanisms are timeless. The medium is new. What once took years, whispers, or courtly gossip now spreads globally in seconds, reaching millions of eyes and feeding the instinctive desire to witness the fall of others. Yet, this modern arena carries moral and psychological consequences. The constant exposure to others' perceived failures can distort our sense of empathy, skew our perception of success, and heighten feelings of inadequacy. It encourages comparison at a scale never experienced before, reinforcing resentment and envy. It reminds us that the instinct to see rivals falter is not inherently benign. It can be manipulated, weaponized, and monetized. Algorithms and media platforms capitalize on these impulses, creating a feedback loop where human desire for vindication or validation is exploited for profit and influence. But there is a paradox. While social media amplifies our impulses toward envy and schadenfreude, it also illuminates them. We are confronted daily with the evidence of our own reactions, the choices of engagement, the subtle pleasures we take in another's stumble. This self-reflection, difficult though it may be, offers an opportunity. By recognizing these instincts, by observing how they manifest in a digital context, we can begin to question their impact on our behavior, our relationships, and our society. In this modern arena, ancient instincts collide with contemporary technology, producing a landscape where envy, rivalry, and resentment are more visible and potent than ever. The pleasures and dangers of witnessing another's downfall have not disappeared. They have been magnified, codified, and transformed. Understanding this is crucial if we are to navigate not only our private impulses, but the collective currents of social judgment, online spectacle, and the ethically complex world we now inhabit. The philosophy of our rejection, ego, identity, and the dark mirror. Rejection is an experience that cuts deeper than failure, for it strikes not only at our ambitions, but at the fragile architecture of the self. To be dismissed, ignored, or denied is to confront a wound in our identity, a reflection of our perceived value in the eyes of another, and within that wound, a quiet, persistent shadow often emerges, a desire, however subtle, to witness the downfall of the one who rejected us. This shadow is not vanity. It is the mind's attempt to restore equilibrium, to reclaim a sense of significance lost in the moment of denial. Philosophers and psychologists alike have long examined this phenomenon. Kierkegaard wrote of despair in the self, noting that rejection triggers not just pain, but reflection, forcing us to confront our place in the world. Sartre explored existential alienation, arguing that the gaze of another, their judgment, their approval, their dismissal, shapes the contours of our identity. When someone denies us, the rejection becomes a mirror, reflecting our insecurities, our ambitions, and our latent desire for vindication. It is this mirror that reveals the dark undercurrents of the psyche, the subtle pleasures and resentments we often refuse to name. Psychology offers further insight. When someone who has rejected us faces misfortune, a surge of subtle satisfaction can arise. Not necessarily cruelty, but a restoration of balance. It is a reaffirmation that social hierarchies, emotional investments, and egoistic stakes are, in some sense, recalibrated. The mind interprets this as justice or symmetry. The world momentarily aligns with our expectations, and our wounded sense of self finds solace. These reactions are neither rare nor immoral. They are part of the architecture of human consciousness, designed to help us navigate social and emotional complexity. Yet there is a paradox inherent in this experience. The ego simultaneously recoils from and revels in such satisfaction. Conscience tells us we should feel compassion, forgiveness, or indifference. Instinct whispers of quiet triumph, of validation, of subtle pleasure. This internal friction between what we think we ought to feel and what we instinctively do creates a tension that is both uncomfortable and illuminating. It forces us to confront our own moral boundaries, our hidden desires, and the fragile interplay between self-interest and ethics. The dark mirror of rejection extends beyond individual experience. It is a lens through which we understand social interactions, competitive dynamics, and the architecture of rivalry. In workplaces, romantic relationships, or public life, the interplay between rejection and resentment informs behavior, decision-making, and emotional responses. It drives us toward reflection, withdrawal, or confrontation, shaping the way we engage with others. In this sense, the shadow is both destructive and instructive. It warns us of our vulnerabilities while illuminating the cognitive and emotional patterns that define our interactions. The philosophical implication is profound. To confront the pleasure we might take in another's misfortune is to confront the fragility of the self itself. It is an invitation to examine how ego, identity, and desire intertwine in the shaping of our moral compass. Awareness transforms instinct into insight. The shadow that once threatened to define us becomes a tool for understanding, a guide for navigating the complex landscape of human relationships. In the end, rejection and the desire for vindication are inseparable from the human experience. They are neither aberrations nor moral failings. They are fundamental reflections of our consciousness, illuminating the tension between vulnerability and power, between ego and ethics. The dark mirror we encounter in rejection is, ultimately, a mirror we must learn to read, not to indulge in its impulses blindly, but to recognize, understand, and transcend them. Collective Schadenfreude, society and power. While envy and resentment may begin as private experiences, they rarely remain confined to the individual. Across history, societies have recognized and exploited these impulses, channeling the pleasure derived from another's misfortune into mechanisms of control, influence, and power. Collective Schadenfreude is a phenomenon where the instinct to see rivals fall is amplified by shared attention, turning individual desire into a social force with profound consequences. Throughout history, political leaders understood the value of orchestrating or highlighting the downfall of adversaries. Public trials, executions, and humiliations served multiple purposes. They punished the guilty, affirmed societal norms, and satisfied the crowd's appetite for validation through the suffering of others. In this context, the pleasure of the audience was not incidental, it was essential. Witnessing the fall of a rival, a traitor, or a political opponent reinforced the social hierarchy, reaffirmed loyalty, and subtly shaped collective morality. What we see here is the alignment of instinct and strategy, the conscious manipulation of human psychology for societal ends. In modern times, the mechanisms have evolved, but the underlying principle remains the same. Media, politics, and corporate environments have become arenas where collective Schadenfreude thrives. Scandals are not merely reported, they are amplified. Public figures, celebrities, and corporate leaders who falter are dissected in real time, their missteps broadcast for millions to witness. Online platforms and news outlets profit from attention, capitalizing on the instinctive delight we take in watching others stumble. Algorithms, designed to prioritize engagement, unintentionally, or sometimes deliberately, fuel our fascination with the failures of those in power or those we perceive as rivals. The psychological consequences of this collective dynamic are profound. Shared pleasure in the misfortune of others creates a sense of cohesion, a bonding over moral judgment, amusement, or outrage. Yet it also normalizes judgmental behavior, reduces empathy, and fosters polarization. When large groups are encouraged to revel in another's failure, the individual moral compass is often overshadowed by the crowd, and what begins as subtle satisfaction can escalate into harassment, ostracism, or systemic punishment. Collective Schadenfreude transforms private instinct into public spectacle, magnifying both its intensity and its potential for harm. The phenomenon is not limited to politics or celebrity culture. Workplace rivalries, institutional failures, and social controversies all activate the same mechanisms. When a competitor's misfortune is celebrated or widely discussed, it validates the social hierarchy, reassures those who feel threatened, and subtly communicates, "We are here, we observe, we judge." Even when individuals are unaware of their participation, they are enmeshed in a social feedback loop, where attention, commentary, and shared amusement reinforce collective behavior. Philosophically, this raises uncomfortable questions. If the pleasure we derive from another's downfall can be amplified and directed by societal structures, how free are we from manipulation? How much of our judgment is instinctive, and how much is socially engineered? When the individual and collective psyche align in the observation of failure, the results are both predictable and powerful. Societies can punish, control, or reward not only through laws and policy, but through the very architecture of human desire. Understanding collective Schadenfreude is essential to understanding power itself. From ancient arenas to modern media landscapes, it is clear that human impulses, envy, resentment, desire for vindication, are tools that societies have always wielded. Recognizing this dynamic illuminates the ways in which private instincts interact with public structures, showing that what feels personal and instinctive is often entwined with systems far larger than ourselves. In acknowledging this, we confront a moral and intellectual challenge: to observe these impulses without being wholly governed by them, to recognize the interplay of instinct and structure, and to navigate a world where the pleasure in another's downfall can shape both private emotion and collective fate. It is a lesson not only in psychology, but in ethics, power, and the human condition itself. The paradox of desire and the path forward. We began with the shadow within, tracing the subtle pleasures that arise when others falter. We moved through history, psychology, and society, uncovering the timeless roots of envy, resentment, and Schadenfreude. Now we arrive at a paradox. The very instincts that have shaped human interaction for millennia also carry the potential for reflection, growth, and transformation. The same impulses that lead us to relish another's downfall can, if recognized, guide us toward profound understanding of ourselves and the world around us. The paradox is this: human desire is inherently ambivalent. We are drawn simultaneously to others' success and failure, to empathy and judgment, to admiration and envy. This duality is particularly acute when confronted with rejection, rivalry, or injustice. The mind instinctively measures, compares, and evaluates, producing feelings that are both satisfying and uncomfortable, pleasurable and morally complex. It is in navigating this tension that we encounter the full weight of our consciousness, the capacity for self-awareness, moral reasoning, and ethical reflection. Philosophically, this is a space where introspection becomes a necessity. Kierkegaard's reflections on despair, Sartre's existential examination of the self, and Nietzsche's exploration of power converge on a single insight. To understand desire and resentment is to confront the human condition itself. To acknowledge the shadow within is not to surrender to it, it is to illuminate it, to hold it under observation, and to engage with it thoughtfully. Our fascination with another's downfall is not a flaw to be eradicated, but a lens through which we may see the architecture of our own mind, the fragility of our ego, and the moral choices that define our actions. In practical terms, this awareness has consequences. Recognizing envy, resentment, and Schadenfreude in ourselves allows us to moderate their influence on behavior, relationships, and decision-making. We can transform instinctive impulses into conscious reflection, converting private feelings into ethical insight. Awareness becomes a form of agency. We are no longer passive participants in our psychological reactions, but active observers capable of shaping their expression. The same impulse that once tempted us toward vindication can instead guide empathy, understanding, and measured judgment. Society, too, can benefit from this insight. Collective Schadenfreude, amplified by social media, political spectacle, and mass attention, can be moderated through cultural reflection, media literacy, and ethical engagement. By understanding the ancient and modern mechanisms that exploit our desires, we reclaim a degree of control, resisting manipulation and cultivating a more intentional interaction with both content and community. Awareness at the individual level can ripple outward, challenging societal patterns of judgment, cruelty, and spectacle. Ultimately, the paradox of desire is inseparable from the human experience. We are creatures of contrast, wired to feel both the exhilaration of others' success and the subtle satisfaction of their failure. But within this duality lies possibility. By observing the shadow, by interrogating the impulses that arise from envy, rivalry, and rejection, we transform instinct into reflection, desire into understanding, and moral ambiguity into insight. As this journey concludes, we return to the question that framed it. Why do some people wish for their competitors' fall or the downfall of those who rejected them? The answer is complex, layered, and uncomfortable. It is not merely a matter of cruelty or weakness. It is a testament to the intricacy of human psychology, the architecture of social systems, and the paradoxical nature of desire itself. To witness, to reflect, and to understand is to confront our shadows, not to eliminate them, but to navigate them with consciousness and care. In the end, the darkness within us is neither enemy nor anomaly. It is a part of what it means to be human. The path forward is not denial, but acknowledgement. The true challenge and the opportunity lies in observing the shadow, understanding its origins, and allowing that understanding to guide us toward empathy, wisdom, and the deliberate shaping of our own moral landscape. It is here, in the tension between instinct and reflection, that we find the paradox of desire, and perhaps the possibility of transcending it.